I would like to right now introduce our featured speakers who will be joining me on stage, and they are Jason Hall, CEO of Greater St. Louis, Inc., Andrea Faccio, President and Chief Growth Officer at Nestle Purina, and joining us from Washington, D.C., and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is John Baselice, Vice President of Immigration Policy. Well, thank you all for being part of this panel. We could probably go all day talking with you about this topic. But Jason, before I get started, I don't know if you all heard this, but it's worth repeating once again, the news from last week. I mean, the timing could not have been better with this event coming today, that the U.S. Census Bureau says the St. Louis Metro led the nation with the highest percentage increase in foreign-born population among the country's 30 largest metro areas. And that was not even a little increase. It was 23.2% between 2022 and 23. And that is the largest one-year increase in immigrant population on record for our region. I think that's worth another round of applause. That is very amazing and fantastic, but we have a lot more work to do. I'm going to start with you, Jason. Can you just set the scene for us and tell us why St. Louis needs to grow our population and what are the potential impacts for our economy if we don't?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Well, first, I do want to acknowledge, Tim and Rodney and Betsy has put on an amazing event for St. Louis, but the timing of the release of census data to coordinate with your gala really takes it to the next level. So congratulations on that. I think, look, as we come out of the pandemic, this is a region with a level of civic energy, a level of ambition about its future that I haven't seen in my lifetime. It's truly extraordinary. And I think we stared down the reality. And the harsh reality is, over the last 20 years, our population has largely been flat. That is not sustainable. It is truly the existential threat to everything that we love about this place and securing its long-term future. So rather than hand-wringing, I think this region has come together and said, look, we have got to grow, and we need to do so inclusively. And I think those are really the two questions that define this decade. There is only one, as I like to say, short-term lever that you can pull to move those population numbers quickly, and that is a laser focus on immigrants and refugees. The work and the success that we have been recognized around the country is obviously built on 10 years of really hard work and vision to get us to this point. It is critical to meeting the moment that we are and regaining as a region of growth. And I will tell you this, what's exciting is that this big surge in foreign-born talent that is critical to fueling our next economy comes at a time when many of these other big data points are all pointing in the same direction. I'm not sure I can remember a time in my lifetime when we could say the St. Louis Metro is the 16th fastest growing metro in the country, far exceeding our current population rank. When the mid-year jobs report came out, St. Louis cracked into the top 10 for fastest growing job markets in the country. First time since 1990 that has occurred. And then seeing these new numbers of the largest foreign-born population growth on record in the region, something special is happening. It is leaders in this room that is pushing this region to new levels, and I'm extremely excited, but we've got to stay the course. We've got to stay focused on this. We cannot punt the ball too early. We need 10 years of what we just experienced this year, and if so, we certainly win the future.
Well, speaking of bringing more people here, John, I'm going to ask you, being that you work on immigration policy in Washington, D.C., it's an election year. We hear a lot about immigration. It doesn't seem like a lot is actually happening, though. Can you kind of give us a little lay of the land as to where things stand?
Before I answer that question, I want to thank the World Trade Center St. Louis and all the partners here for inviting me here today. Look, it is an election year. Nothing's going to happen between now and Election Day. Depending upon what happens in November, There may be an active lame duck session of Congress. There may be a relatively low activity session of lame duck of Congress. But we are going on 34 years of congressional inaction. And look what it has wrought. Are we surprised that our immigration system isn't functioning well? This is a system, by and large, in terms of how it controls how people come here legally. It hasn't changed since I was 6. I'm not trying to age myself, but it's a long time ago. And that was a time, I remember going to my dad's office when I was 6. He had his Rolodex for all of his contacts, and his newfangled piece of technology was the IBM PS1 with a whopping 25 hertz, not megahertz, hertz processor, and like maybe 25 megabytes of a hard drive, and his fax machine. American businesses don't operate this way. We have smartphones, we have the internet. Our immigration system is timed, it was designed for an economy that was much smaller and doesn't exist anymore. And our immigration system just hasn't been able to change with the times. And this is why you're having a situation where you have, the way I look at it, you have 2 immigration systems operating in tandem. You have the one that Congress designed 34 years ago. It's slow, it's cumbersome, it's bureaucratic, doesn't meet the needs of business in a timely fashion. You also have the system that's basically operated by the cartels. It's cruel, it's inhumane, it leads to an awful lot of human suffering on the southern border, but it's ruthlessly efficient. And until the federal government gets serious about eating into the cartel's business line, we're going to continue to have these problems today. And it really is a shame that had we been able to reform this during the mid-2000s or in 2013, when I was on Capitol Hill in Senator Rubio's office, things would have been better. Can't say they would have been perfect, but they would have been better.
Andrea, you have worked around the world. You've worked in many different countries, and now you're here with us in St. Louis. And as Nestle's Chief Growth Officer, I'm sure you are very familiar with some of the complications in getting people here. But what would you say, why is Nestle interested in bringing global talent? What are the benefits?
Okay. First, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the World Trade Center to have this event. And I would say there's 2 angles for me. I'm a foreigner born myself, so I'm from Brazil. I've been with Nestle for more than 28 years, and I had the pleasure to work in my home country, in Switzerland, Australia. Now I call St. Louis home here. So there's the personal side on how you do moving around and what is the challenge that you may have as a global talent. But from a business perspective, we saw Sam talking. We saw Professor Novak talking as well. It's like how we talk about talent is very important. Diversity of thoughts is very important. So if I give an example on Purina, for example, it is a global company. We know that pet parents may be very similar around the world, but they also have differences. So bringing people from different countries can help us to think differently. So innovation is something that you can foster because you have people that had experiences in other parts. You also bring more collaboration. You bring different thinking, and also for the culture of the company. I think from an employee perspective, we have several people from overseas working at Purina in different facilities, in our factories, in our research and development areas as well. So you have that employee expectation and culture. It is a much better thing.
And Debbie, if I can add on to her comments just a little bit. The complementarity of having foreign nationals coming here and working in the United States, it allows businesses to grow. It allows them to raise more revenue, which allows them to buy more capital equipment. It also gives the company more opportunities to advance their American workers. Like, I know it's cheesy to say, together everyone achieves more, but it helps you build a team and a culture that can help you as a business expand and carry you to heights you never thought you would have reached. And to get back to your initial question to me, you look at what's the opportunity cost of not acting. I have talked to so many businesses who have foregone work, whether it's a construction company or it's a seafood processing plant or a landscape firm. If they don't have the people to service the client, they can't take on the contract. Or they take on the contract and they eventually lose it because not only do you lose the contract because you've upset somebody, you have your reputation drops a little bit, you take a few hits because you didn't serve the client well, and it limits how much they can grow. And if the business can't grow, that has an impact on what GDP could be.
I was interested in Sam Altman pointing out, for people who may not have even thought of it this way, that in his perfect world, we would be inviting people from all over the world to come here and start companies, and the thought that somebody couldn't come here to start a wonderful company is really too bad, because maybe Sam would have the next Square or something here. Jason, what are you hearing from the businesses and the people that you work with in Greater St. Louis, Inc.?
Well, I think it's one of these issues that's really united our business community. It is, I think, because we are staring down this imperative that we need to grow our population as we're revving up the economy. It's one of those like, uh-oh, the dog caught the car. Now we need people to fill these jobs. I mean, it is just an imperative that we grow it. And I think it's been extraordinary to see the shared values. It's also leading in our world to civic innovation. I was just with a group of my national peers last week, and it is such an unusual partnership that the business community and the Refugee Resettlement Agency are often locked arm in arm on issues very upfront in public here. I think it's producing new partnerships and new possibilities around this, and just emerging as a shared regional priority in the way that I think Betsy and others that laid the groundwork for this 10 years ago hoped that it would be. I would also add, we often talk about, we think of foreign-born talent coming and filling roles in companies. It's also, wake-up call. Look at the stewards of the largest employers in this region now. As Tony Chang takes the helm of RGA this year, Rodrigo Santos is the CEO of Bayer Crop Science, Stephen Parker at Boeing Defense, and the list goes on and on. It is changing in this region, and I think it underscores what an economic imperative is. As the stewards of our largest institutions, they are here and they are foreign-born. And it is an imperative that we be a welcoming community. We've made mistakes in the past as a region, I think, by not being inclusive, and it has hurt us from an anchor employer situation. And that's before you get to the shared priority around being a thriving startup community. I think it's appropriate with Nestle here, is, I think, most often typified by the late Dr. Bill Danforth leading visionary work to make this region a startup community. And obviously the accolades have been just racked up over the last decade in that front. Let's remind ourselves that a foreign-born resident is 60% more likely to start a business than somebody born in this country. It is absolutely critical that you feed that talent pipeline for all of those foreign-born entrepreneurs that are critical to revitalizing our economy and literally planting the seeds of the next generation of corporate headquarters. Absolutely essential. And that is where our business community is at, and that is why you'll continue to see us upfront and unapologetic about this priority.
We've talked a lot about the work that World Trade Center and the Mosaic Project have done to bring more foreign-born to St. Louis, but other parts of that are bringing foreign-born who live in other parts of the country to St. Louis, attracting them to come here, and also, once they're here, making them feel welcome so they stay here. So Andrea, let me ask you, as you consider St. Louis your home now, what was it like when you first came here? Is there something, or are there things that were challenging being foreign-born, and what could St. Louis do to make it more welcoming?
Yeah, and it's a great question, and I always talk about it. When it is very hard to move from one country to another, especially if it's not your mother tongue, if you don't speak the language necessarily in the same way that everybody. And I would say when I came here, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know St. Louis. I'd never been to St. Louis before I moved here. I knew Nestle, Purina would embrace me, and I will be belonging in that company, and it will make me feel very welcome, but I didn't know how the city would make me feel. I called some friends before moving because it was the first place I moved that I've never been. And I said, what should I expect? Because you read online and you don't know. And I must say that it was an amazing experience. I was very welcome. People here are very nice. Like, I thought that, do I fit in a smaller city in the Midwest versus a more cosmopolitan city in other parts where my people would be more present? And every time, I know I have an accent, so every time that I say something, people very gladly ask me where I'm from. Not from a judging perspective, but from an embracing perspective. So I would say bringing people in here. If your company, you're trying to do that, you need to make sure that you have the tools to help them as well. It is a place, I remember the day I came to St. Louis. It was at night. I didn't know anything where they were. I don't know where the grocery store is. How should I go? Where should I go? And how the community, but mainly the companies that are bringing people, helping them to situate, help the families. I think the families, in my case, I was by myself when I moved here, but when you have a family, you are the person working. So probably you have your network, you have people that you're talking to, but what about your family? How are you helping the kids at school? I used to work for the Latin American division of Purina when I joined, and most of people were from Latin America, and a lot of the kids had a hard time adapting to school. So what can we do as a society to help that, to be more inclusive? I know the Mosaic, there's a lot of that, and we have a lot of other people grateful helping us. So I would say embrace the talent. I was very welcome, and I feel that I belong here, and today I said it is my home, and my family is from St. Louis as well. So.
John, we have talked about the difficulties in immigration policy, and Sam Altman also mentioned falling behind, and you said the same thing with, no changes in 34 years. The country is starting to fall behind. What are your thoughts or feelings once we get past this election season, when it's no longer a political football for a presidential election season? Do you think that there is finally the impetus to do something?
I feel like a Bills fan waiting for a Super Bowl, saying, yes, there is hope. But in all seriousness, just this past week, I was speaking at a round table involving Congressman Tom Suozzi, who's a Democrat from New York, and Congressman Morgan Luttrell, who's a Republican from Texas. These are two guys who didn't know each other all that well, but they kicked off a relationship. They're saying, listen, enough is enough. Because the problems that we're dealing with, whether you're talking about border security problems, you're talking about issues that, the struggles that communities have to deal with, an influx of people. Growth brings problems too. It's not as if growth is just going to be clean and neat and just honky-dory all the time. But as someone who's from upstate New York, you want to be a place that's growing and not a place that's shrinking. Because when you have a shrinking tax base, it's really tough to operate efficiently as a government entity. I look at those gentlemen and the people that they're bringing together to try to build a coalition to say, listen, it's time to get serious about securing our border. It's time to get serious about what types of changes do we need to have to our asylum system, because it's a significant contributing factor to what we're dealing with on the borders, the way the asylum system is being, having roughshod ran over it, to be honest. But getting back to an earlier point, because you have a system that is so antiquated, it's not meant to deal with situations like this. And until we get serious about actually having green card quotas and H-1B quotas and H-2A programs that work for ag, that aren't just seasonal. So dairies and folks that are raising livestock can also access this. There's no cow milking season, so they can't get it in over that program. H-2Bs. We have 66,000 visas that we issue each year. By a stroke of good lobbying, which just happens to involve me, we've been able to get supplemental visas for the past several years. And, to give the Biden administration credit where credit's due, they've given the full 64,716 visas that are available that Congress makes through the appropriations process. But if you look at the number of workers that are seeking entry, it's over 200,000. So even in that situation, for every 2 workers that seasonal employers need in the country, they're only getting 1. So there's a lot of opportunity cost and just foregone business growth, profit, additional taxes for communities in which they operate that we're foregoing because our immigration system just isn't keeping up. And I'd like to think that they're focused on the border, they're focused on asylum, and they're focused on making modest but meaningful changes to our legal immigration system. Their package is designed to be a down payment on more broader reforms that we need. Because as someone who was part of the last comprehensive immigration reform effort that didn't succeed, I don't see an appetite for everyone to say, let's deal with the whole soup to nuts immigration system in one fell swoop, because you overload the plane, it can't take off. But it'll be very interesting to see how, once they put legislation together, once they start sharing it with their colleagues, and there's been a significant amount of outreach to other members of Congress, and it's been relatively positive. So if I had some wood, I'd knock on it, but it's looking good right now.
I think it's just because I'd like to think all of us in this room are ambassadors for this region about the need to continue to be an even more global city. And I think with political rhetoric as it is today, I think sometimes we lose essential truths. As I've gotten closer to this issue, it is a really bureaucratic process to become a refugee to this country. It's like really, really hard. And the one time where we got some reprieve from that, and I think it's an area where this region shined, was with the fall of Kabul and the evacuation of Afghan families that supported our American military men and women and whose lives were on the line to find a new home. And it was a rare situation where what is known as a special immigrant visa was allowed because of this very unique military situation, and allowed people to come in with much more speed than is typical. And of course, this region mobilized around that opportunity, made smart investments. So those numbers we're talking about today, I'd certainly remind us, and at least in the greater St. Louis Inc. world, entrepreneur and philanthropist Jerry Schlichter was the catalyst in our world to say, let's act quick and go after Afghan refugees. And now over 1,300 Afghan refugees call this region home, and they are creating businesses today.
In fact, yes. Just this week, we had a story on KMOX of the International Institute, and thanks to Jerry Schlichter starting that, 3 Afghan refugees got $15,000 grants to help them with the businesses that they started. Real quickly, do you have off the top of your head, I know refugees, especially Afghan refugees, are very entrepreneurial,
yes,
and we always need to remind people of that.
Yep.
Do you know offhand how entrepreneurial? I know Betsy is in the audience, she would know.
Yeah, well, again, I fall back. In general, we know that foreign-born immigrants are 60% more likely to create a business. And it makes sense when you stop and think about it. Think about uprooting your life, leaving some very challenging situations. You have to innovate by necessity, and I think that ingrains a skill, a drive that is hard to imagine without going through those circumstances. But we are seeing a lot of new businesses created from the Afghan population, as we are with other foreign-born populations in the metro.
If there's one thing I could add to his comments, that's another piece of legislation that might, I'm saying the word might, be able to move prior to the end of this Congress. And it really is a shame that it is taking us this long to provide the same type of benefits we did to the Cubans after the Bay of Pigs, after the Vietnamese after the fall of Saigon. And if you compare today with how we treated our Vietnamese allies after the fall of Saigon, it took us 2 years. Both House of Congress and the President signed a bill that allowed Vietnamese people to become lawful permanent residents after they fled the fall of Saigon. We're at 3 years and counting. And these are the folks who stood side by side with our men and women in uniform, and it was our nation's longest war. For us to leave these folks in what I call immigration purgatory is shameful. It really is shameful.
Andrea, I'm going to give you the last word here today. For people in the audience who may be inspired now to think, oh, I'm going to start thinking about hiring foreign-born, but maybe haven't really, gotten that far. Do you have any advice or things that they should definitely think about?
Yeah, I would say first embrace it because it is, I do believe, I think I add a lot of value for my company. So I'm sure somebody that has different experience, because when you're put in a situation like any foreign-born is put on, you're growing and you're being more creative and you're challenging your way of thinking. So you bring the experience to the work as well. So I said embrace that. And as I said before, think about what is the structure you put in place to help them. How can you do? And it's not only your company, there is so many other places. We have all the examples here in this room that can support this transition. It's a person that when comes is feeling, I would say, vulnerable. You don't know what to expect. You don't speak the language. People will not understand you sometimes. And so it's hard for the other side. So how you make that person feels that belongs here, that is the place to be, that they can call San Luis home like I do. So I would say embrace it. Your company will be better off of having diverse of thought, or having diverse of people, and I'm sure the business will grow much faster.
Jason Hall of Greater St. Louis Inc., Andrea Faccio with Nestle, and John Baselice, thank you all for being part of this panel today. It was very informative. Round of applause.